Joe Biden doesn't get enough blame for setting up Kamala Harris to fail, and he doesn't get enough blame for letting Donald Trump back into the White House.
What makes you presume that in a meritocracy, elevating people of color, elevating women, does not mean that they're qualified?
I wish your book was fiction. It's how painful it is of the state of political affairs. What's the message in your book to those who see all this happening? Say, hey, we voted. We did the thing. We did the thing we were supposed to do. We knocked doors. We donated money. We gave them power. And still, they're being the white moderate Dr. King talked about. What's the next step in progress there?
One of the things I really talk about is the importance of...
All right, y'all. Thanks for tuning in to Let's Address This with Qasim Rashid. I'm so excited about Atima Omara joining us today, an old friend of mine from back when I was in Virginia and author of a phenomenal new book called The Instigators. Atima, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Qasim.
We were talking offline about how I don't get much time to read fiction anymore, so I really enjoy reading excellent writing that's nonfiction, your book in that category, although I wish your book was fiction because it's how painful it is of the state of political affairs. Summarize, what is The Instigators? Why did you write it? And what do you hope to accomplish with it?
Yeah, so I wrote The Instigators because, and Qasim, we've talked about this before, I've worked in democratic politics and progressive movement stuff for years, especially when you're working with campaigns and candidates. A lot of the people who end up commenting, get taken seriously on strategies and the way forward are not the people most impacted by essentially what's happening when rising authoritarianism. And, what really struck me as an organizer and activist during that time is when I wanted to look for inspiration as to what to do, guidance, I always looked to those who had been some of the most marginalized in American politics and in society, and that's Black women. One of the things that I learned, I take from them and I wanted to tell in this book was that, these are women who in very rough political times, rougher than this, hard to imagine, but in many ways, rougher, Jim Crow, times of slavery, who were stepping up and, holding power to account, putting their lives on the line, literally, to push for a better world for themselves, for their community, and by extension, helped us build the democracy that we have had. The Voting Rights Act is possible because of their literal labor and organizing. And so I'm like, what can we take from these lessons of them and trying to build a truly inclusive, multiracial democracy and, how to fight authoritarianism?
I love that notion, right? Because at the end of the day, representation is one of the most underappreciated necessities of a functioning society. And there's this tendency, I'd love to get your thoughts on this, that among racists, I'll just say it, who think that representation is contradictory to meritocracy.
Right.
And it's always been a cop-out. And to them, I always say, okay, let's assume for a second that Ketanji Brown Jackson was not the first Black woman on the Supreme Court. Let's say you have an entire history of Black women, and you had Kevin Brown as the first white man on the Supreme Court. How different do you think our country would look if there's only one white man in the history of the United States who sat on the Supreme Court, and it was all Black women? It would be extraordinarily different. As much as you're talking about meritocracy and all this nonsense, I guarantee suddenly you would want that representation. Can you talk a little bit about how you address that notion that representation somehow is a contradiction to having merit, to being in a place of power?
The thing that I think is always interesting is that there's always this assumption, and I remember getting into this argument with this. I was actually representing a candidate at like a fair in New England, and he said, "Oh, I love, the candidate you're representing," but he was taking issue with my shirt at the time, which said "elect women," and he's like, "But I just don't think, it's like broadly elect women, they should be like qualified." And I'm like, what makes you presume that like a woman is qualifying? What makes you assume that in a meritocracy, elevating people of color, elevating women does not mean that they're qualified? I'm sorry. So there's that for one. And then the second thing is the data really backs it up, and I try to really lay it out in the book. There's like tons of researchers who pull together studies of how our government has passed policies that have been more impactful to all communities when there's more women in government, when there's more Black women and Latino women and just people of color in general, when there's more disabled folks, when there's more queer folks in government. There are more policies that are impactful when our government is more representative. And a good example of that is a study I cited that was like surveying state legislatures, I think about 15 of them over the course of like 10 years. And And they noted that progressive leaning Black women, so basically Democratic affiliated or progressive leaning, were the top in pushing across their states policies that were, impacting the social safety net, trying to improve it, criminal justice reform, healthcare, initiatives that improved poverty, basically anti-poverty initiatives. Second to that was like Latino women. And why? Because these are communities, they see their folks, even if they're not from those backgrounds, they know that their communities are dealing with this. And when that happens, they're passing policies that impact everyone for the better.
One of the points you make, and Zumi beautifully said, I want to build on your point there. On page 31, I'm going to just quote, you say, for most of my life, never has a lack of consideration for Black women as voters been more apparent than around election time. And we're seeing so many examples of this, Black women, in particular, Black people in general. We were talking off air, but there's two examples out of Florida that come to mind right now. You've got an extraordinarily qualified Black woman in Angie Nixon, born and raised in Florida, elected to the state house, champion of preventing gun violence, has passed consequential bills, has been at the forefront. Your shirt says progress is not polite. She got arrested on the House floor for opposing DeSantis's racist gerrymandering bill. And so what does the Democratic Party do? They fly in a mediocre white guy, a center-right Alexander Vindman, and give him all the attention and oxygen. You got a redistricting in Florida, where now you've got a district that is majority Black, one of the last majority Black districts, and you got like 7 or 8 very qualified Black candidates running, some of them extraordinarily qualified, and you've got a white woman, Debbie Wasserman-Schultz, saying, nope, I'm going to come in and use my name recognition and tell Black people how they should be represented.
Yeah.
It's one thing to be able to call out the racist gutting of the Voting Rights Act, of Shelby versus Holder, of just the GOP overt, disenfranchisement of Black voters. Like, that's very obvious. How do we grapple? How do we address on the left, where we have people like Vindman, Debbie Wasserman-Schultz, or just, Democrats, corporate Democrats on the left in general, saying, hey, we're not racist by, gutting the Voting Rights Act, but we will come into power and tell you how to feel about yourselves or how to handle these issues. Like, how do we get folks to recognize that this is a different flavor of racism, but in many ways it's just as destructive?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about some of these redistricting battles that we're having right now, and we had tried to pass a redistricting amendment in my state.
Yeah, Virginia. Yeah.
Yeah, and we were successful. And then, of course, the Republican-led Supreme Court overturned that. But in these races to try and keep up with Republicans, what ends up happening as a result is that we'll get more Democrats, but will we get more Democrats that are reflective of the base of the Democratic Party?
Yeah.
So having more white Democrats is not in any way going to make up for Black, the lack of Black, Latino, Asian representation in government, especially when you're talking about, in the case of the Debbie Wasserman Schultz, that person is going to be leading a community that is predominantly Black. And it's one thing where you have a situation like in Memphis where Steve Cohen, he was in a multi-way primary, but Black voters predominantly voted for him and kept returning him to public office. That was their choice. But the whole point of the Voting Rights Act was to avoid a situation where you have districts drawn and then Black voters are not allowed by default to select people that they want to lead them. Yeah.
Well, I mean, and so kind of building on that, and Dr. King in his letter from Birmingham jail talks about how the white moderate is worse than the KKK, and I've had people take exception that I'm representing his words, and I'm like, well, it tells me you haven't actually read his words, because he's talking about the greatest stumbling block is not the white citizens councilor or the Ku Klux Klaner, but the white moderate, who is more committed to order than to justice, who prevents a negative piece, which is the absence of tensions, rather than the positive piece, which is the presence of justice. Again, you brought up Virginia. 3 million people voted that, hey, we want this redistricting. Supreme Court decided no. And then you have a trifecta with Lieutenant Governor and the AG, and the Stanwiger says, nah, we're not going to do anything about it. Same thing in New Jersey. Mikey Sherrill, you've got a trifecta, runs on protecting people from being targeted by ICE. And then when ICE is running amok in Delaney, sends state police as well to kind of help ICE. I'm wearing a vote hat. You're wearing a shirt that says progress is not polite.
Yeah.
What's the message in your book to those who see all this happening? Say, hey, we voted. We did the thing. We did the thing we were supposed to do. We knocked doors. We donated money. We gave them power. And still, they're being the white moderate Dr. King talked about. What's the next step in progress there?
Yeah. One of the things I really talk about is the importance of folks engaging in the political process at the state and local level. And I really try to break down, we live in this, system where we got a two-party system. We do have, kind of minority political parties and Working Families Party and Democratic Socialists. And what I urge people to do, I know folks say I came out and I voted. But one of the things that I experienced, and I know Qasim, this is sort of your experience, is that when you're getting engaged in politics, and for better or worse, we have the Democratic Party, that you should try and actively get involved in the ranks of the party, because you're setting you're setting the primary process. You're mingling with the people who will potentially be candidates.
Yep.
You can be in charge of helping to recruit and
Mhm.
train, depending on the roles that you have. And I mean, the party has changed a lot. Like, we were able to have an Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and an Ayanna Pressley and others because activists worked to get them elected. Activists supported them. Activists donated to them. You want to see an Angie Nixon in Florida in public office, donate to her campaign. Eventually, somebody like a Chuck Schumer, I can't remember if he has to run in 28. I think he's up in 28.
Yeah, he's 28.
Yeah. Primaries are a good thing. You have a chance to pick the person that you want, and encourage the people that you want to run. And so we still have, I know we think of the Democratic Party as this thing that's like this entity that we can't move, but it's very much made up of people like you and I trying to push to make it and change to be better.
Yeah.
So that's part of what I said. Yeah.
No, I love that, and we're seeing the success of that, right? I mean, I'm being critical because I want people to know I'm cognizant of it, and I know that you're just as more, if not more, critical than me. But in addition to Ayanna Pressley, we've got Summer Lee, we've got Chris Rabb in Texas was just elected. We've got some huge wins, and we're seeing that happen. And in the Senate, I think we're seeing some more progressive-minded folks being elected as well. I think we have a real chance of winning the Senate this year as well. What do you see as kind of the biggest stumbling block right now? Like, what is the one or two big things that folks need to get involved in now to make sure we can be successful in the midterms, and assuming Trump doesn't cancel the elections, which unfortunately is a non-0% chance, to make sure we actually take back the White House in 28?
Yeah, it's definitely finding ways to volunteer and be engaged, especially once the primaries are over. If your candidate didn't win, finding ways to push that candidate, that now nominee, to be better on the issues, making sure the campaigns and the organizations that are doing sort of that year-round work. Because one of the biggest stumbling blocks right now is somebody who does, consulting with organizations, is a lot of them, now that the Voting Rights Act has been fully gutted, they're not getting all the funding that they need to mount defense on the ground to really turn out voters. So the engagement of voters, especially younger voters of color, a lot more people are aware of what's happening. They're looking outside and they're like, oh my God. But having conversations with people about it and the importance of this election, to being able to, until 28, have a Congress that really holds him to account, is critical.
Do you have a favorite pick for 28 this early?
No.
Too early. It's too early, but
I know. Honestly, there's people who, we all know the people who are thinking of it, and I'm just like, okay, well, you're gonna have to come with something a little different. I'm gonna have to see some things. I want a candidate. I will say this: I want a candidate who understands that there's no returning to normalcy. Right?
Yes.
I think that was Biden's sort of fault, is that he thought, okay, I can just reset everything, like go back to basic factory setting or something. And that's not. We gotta understand that whatever we're building is going to be different than what was in the past. We have to realize that some of the systems that we have depended on need serious reforms, restructuring, rebuilding. I don't want to hear somebody running for office who isn't trying to grapple with the judicial system and what we're going to do about judges, how they're going to use executive orders in the correct way to fix things, right? That's what I'm interested in seeing in a candidate. It's not just kind of finding ways to really rebuild our social safety net. Because, I know we're at an interesting point in our country when I'm hearing centrists, people I consider centrists, saying, I think billionaires are a threat to society. And
about time.
Yeah, I know. So how do we, take away their power? How do we deregulate technology, or regulate rather, because they're very deregulated, so regulate the tech oligarchy, so that our society can actually benefit everyone.
I think you nailed it. I get a lot of hate for this, but I will stand by it. Joe Biden doesn't get enough blame for setting up Kamala Harris to fail, and he doesn't get enough blame for letting Donald Trump back into the White House. That's just a fact. He ran on saving the soul of America. America.
Yeah.
He ran on saying that he can fix it, he can save democracy, and he says the buck stops with me. Well, my dude, we gave you everything. You had the trifecta, and you
Literally.
left office and let Trump back in.
Yeah.
And I don't agree with this shaming the voters. Hey, you didn't come out or you didn't do this. We did the thing. That's the thing. Like
We
we
did the
did the
thing.
thing, and
Yeah.
then you had everything in your power, and you set up a black woman to fail. Gave her 107 days to meet the whole country. You know, one of the you already know this. One of
Yes.
the top search Google items on election day was, did Joe Biden drop out?
Oh,
That's
Lord.
insane to me.
That part I didn't know.
Yeah, that's insane to me. That's
Yeah.
like, I mean, and that's just a fact. And I don't care if you're the VP. People need more than 100 days to get to know you, right?
Yeah.
It's just a fact. And so I really don't think he gets enough hate for that. And I really, to build on your point, anyone running who says we need to come back and sing kumbaya and hold hands is out of their minds. It's just not going to happen. That rule book is gone. The new rule book is Project 2025. Most of it's already been implemented. And until we have an actual Project 2029 that undoes all the harm done there, and then bills, in addition, expand the Supreme Court, enact term limits, get rid of Citizens United, reinstate the Voting Rights Act and make it permanent, pass universal health care, stop these foreign wars. I mean, these are all things that shouldn't be complicated because they have 60, 70, 80% approval. I've been putting your book link in the comments. Folks are getting it. As we wrap up, are you doing any book tours? How can folks support you? How can they get involved in
Yeah.
the work they're doing?
Yeah. So you can go to the website, theinstigator'sbook.com. We'll have like lots of information about my touring. I'll be July 8th. I will be at Politics and Prose in DC.
Love that spot.
Yes, it's great. And you can go to the website and see that. And then also, if you're in New York on July 15th, I'll be at Powerhouse Arena in Brooklyn with Jess McIntosh. And then July 8th, I'll be with Kimberly Atkins Store, both folks who probably a lot of your followers recognize from MSNBC or MS Now and other podcasts as well. And if you want to actually get like merch like this, Progress is Not Polite, I actually have some of that on the website as well. So
amazing. Atima Omara, it's been such a privilege. I cannot recommend your book highly enough. It's a fantastic aloe for these painful times, and I hope everyone picks it up. The website is theinstigators.book.com, and hope to see you out on one of these book tours. If you come to Chicago, let us know. We'll promote the hell out of it over here.
Yeah, that's I have that. I'm working on that too. So
okay, second half, please let us know. Thank you all for tuning in. Check out the book at theinstigators.book.com, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for tuning in to Let's Address This with Qasim Rashid. Peace out.